It was the middle of the night when the unimaginable happened. In one of the world's most secure prisons, a quiet commotion began to spread like a ripple across the facility. Guards were perplexed, scrambling in every direction. Cameras revealed nothing out of the ordinary, but a terrible truth was beginning to dawn on them. The impossible had happened. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, one of the most feared drug lords in the world, had vanished. No alarms, no signs, just an empty cell and a rising sense of dread. How could someone imprisoned in what was supposed to be an inescapable fortress simply disappear? This wasn't just any escape. It was a statement, a taunt to authorities everywhere, a challenge to the very idea of security itself. The story of Joaquin Guzman wasn't just about the rise of a drug empire. It was a tale of daring, defiance, and a relentless pursuit of freedom. To truly understand how El Chapo executed one of the most elaborate escapes the world has ever seen, we need to go back to the beginning, where a young boy in Sinaloa grew up amidst poverty and turned towards the only opportunity he saw, the drug trade. Before he was El Chapo, he was just Joaquin, a young boy trying to survive in a harsh world. But survival would become something far more ambitious, a quest for power, control, and ultimately a legendary status that would shake not just Mexico, but the entire world. Born in La Tuna, a small village deep within Mexico's rugged mountains, Joaquin was a product of his environment. Sinaloa was a place that offered few opportunities outside of farming or the lucrative but dangerous world of narcotics. His father, an abusive man involved in the drug trade, showed young Joaquin early on the harsh realities of life. By the time he was a teenager, he had already begun making his way into the world of illicit dealings, first as a small-time smuggler, and then as someone with far greater ambitions. His nickname, El Chapo, meaning Shorty, belied the stature of the empire he would eventually build. His short stature was irrelevant. It was his towering influence and determination that mattered. El Chapo's early years were marked by a cunning instinct for survival, a ruthless determination, and a charismatic ability to draw people to his side. By the 1980s, he had aligned himself with powerful figures within the drug cartels, steadily climbing the ranks. Guzman had a knack for logistics. He could plan routes, outthink law enforcement, and execute operations with precision. It wasn't long before he established himself as a key player, building his own faction within the larger cartel networks. His rise was meteoric, fueled by his uncanny ability to predict and outmaneuver both rivals and authorities. He was more than just a drug trafficker. He was a strategist, a visionary, and a man who knew how to exploit every weakness in the system. But Guzman's life wasn't just about expanding an empire. It was also about evading the law. Arrested in 1993, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. And for many, that would have been the end of the story. But for El Chapo, this was merely a setback. His first escape in 2001 would stun the world, showcasing the extent of his influence and the loyalty of his network. It was a reminder that no prison could truly contain him. But it was his second escape, the one that happened in 2015, that truly became a global spectacle, a meticulously crafted tunnel, a daring plan, and a drug lord who refused to be caged. This escape wasn't just an act of defiance, it was a meticulously planned operation that highlighted the lengths to which Guzman would go to regain his freedom. The groundwork for this escape started long before the night he vanished. Guzman's network was far-reaching, and his influence even behind bars was unquestionable. His connections ensured that his plan was not just audacious, but feasible. The tunnel was a feat of engineering, stretching over a mile, complete with ventilation, lights, and even a modified motorcycle to transport the dirt. But how did they manage it? How could someone dig a tunnel of such magnitude directly underneath one of the most secure prisons in Mexico without anyone noticing? The answer lies in the genius and audacity of El Chapo's network. A vast web of loyal operatives willing to risk everything to free their leader. As we unravel this story, you'll see how a seemingly impenetrable prison became the setting for one of the most brilliant escapes ever seen. We'll dive deep into the minds of those involved, explore the planning, the risks, and uncover the secrets that made this impossible feat a reality. The escape was not just about brute force. It was about meticulous timing, coordination, and the unwavering loyalty of those who believed in El Chapo. What drove Guzman to risk everything once again? Was it the allure of freedom, the thrill of outsmarting the system, or simply the refusal to bow down to anyone's authority? And what was it about this man that made him so unstoppable, so untouchable, that even the most secure facilities in the country could not contain him? Stay with us as we peel back the layers of this extraordinary tale, one that blurs the line between legend and reality. Was this the work of a criminal mastermind, or was it the inevitable outcome for someone who refused to be tamed? Was it a testament to the power of human will, or a chilling reminder of how fragile our systems of control really are? You decide. The plan that culminated in the stunning escape of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman on the night of July 11, 2015, was not just a spur-of-the-moment idea. It was years in the making, a perfect blend of meticulous engineering, unwavering loyalty from his closest allies, and Guzman's unyielding desire to reclaim his freedom. The air around the Altiplano prison was thick with tension, yet to those guarding Mexico's most infamous prisoner, there was a false sense of security. It was as if everyone believed that the steel bars, reinforced walls, and state-of-the-art surveillance systems could somehow contain the most notorious escape artist of their generation. They couldn't have been more wrong. The night would prove that the so-called inescapable fortress was anything but. For Guzman, captivity was nothing more than a physical inconvenience. His mind, his resolve, and his influence remained unshackled. The prison authorities underestimated just how powerful Guzman's network was, even while he was behind bars. They didn't realize that El Chapo's reach extended far beyond the confines of his cell, connecting him to an intricate web of individuals who were loyal to the Sinaloa cartel, and to him personally. These were people willing to risk their lives for their leader, and that's precisely what they did. They understood the stakes, but they also understood that Guzman's freedom was something worth fighting for. The tunnel beneath the Altiplano prison was no ordinary tunnel. It was a marvel of engineering, designed specifically for one purpose: to free El Chapo. It stretched over a mile long with dimensions tailored perfectly to accommodate Guzman's frame. It had electric lights, ventilation to keep the air flowing, and even a modified motorcycle fixed to rails to ensure that the journey from his cell to freedom was swift and efficient. This was no desperate scramble through dirt and darkness. It was a calculated, precise route to liberty. It was an endeavor that required careful planning, skilled labor, and unwavering determination. The planning began almost as soon as Guzman found himself in the confines of Altiplano. Trusted members of his organization secured a property outside the prison, the endpoint of what would soon become one of the world's most infamous tunnels. For over a year, a team of engineers and laborers, many of whom had specialized skills and intimate knowledge of tunnel construction, worked tirelessly under the cover of secrecy. They dug deep, inching ever closer to Guzman's cell with a precision that mocked the very idea of high-security imprisonment. They dealt with challenges underground that required creativity and innovation, issues with soil stability, noise, and even ventilation. But they pressed on. For them, this was more than just a job. It was a mission to restore their leader to freedom. The night of the escape was like any other, until it wasn't. Guzman had been carefully watching the patterns of the guards, studying every detail of the prison routine. He observed the changing of shifts, the moments when vigilance seemed to wane, and the blind spots in the prison's surveillance system. When the moment was right, he acted. Surveillance footage later showed Guzman pacing back and forth in his cell, his eyes seemingly calculating every step, every second. Then, without any warning, he approached the shower area, a spot deliberately chosen because it was one of the few blind spots in the cell's surveillance. And then he simply vanished. The tunnel entrance was expertly concealed beneath the shower floor. It was here that Guzman descended into the dark, narrow passageway, where a waiting motorcycle would ferry him along the rail-lined tunnel towards freedom. The sheer audacity of it, the fact that he was moving under the feet of those meant to guard him, defying the authorities once more, was almost cinematic. Guzman had transformed what should have been a concrete cage into the setting for his greatest escape yet. The fact that he was able to execute such a daring plan without the guards even suspecting a thing speaks to the depth of his planning and the loyalty of his men. As the alarm bells began to ring in the prison, chaos ensued. Guards rushed in every direction, desperately trying to piece together what had happened. Their disbelief was palpable. How could they have lost the most notorious drug lord in the world? How could someone have breached the fortress-like walls of Altiplano without leaving a single clue behind? The tunnel discovered later was nothing short of a masterpiece. It was a testament to Guzman's tenacity, his influence, and his ability to outthink even the most sophisticated law enforcement agencies. The prison, designed to hold Mexico's most dangerous individuals, had become the stage for one of the most embarrassing security failures in the country's history. The reaction from the public was a mix of shock, admiration, and fear. For some, El Chapo's escape was a thrilling tale of rebellion against authority, a man refusing to be tamed by a system that had tried to cage him. For others, it was a terrifying reminder of the power that drug cartels wielded, and of the systemic corruption and inefficiencies that plagued the justice system. News outlets around the world scrambled to cover the story, with headlines proclaiming the audacious escape and raising questions about how something of this magnitude could even be possible. How could a man behind bars orchestrate an escape involving such a sophisticated tunnel system? Was it a failure of the prison authorities, or was it something more sinister? Perhaps inside help. Yahoo! News, CNN, and countless other major media outlets reported on the details as they emerged, painting a picture that seemed almost too surreal to be true. Meanwhile, Guzman was gone, vanished without a trace, leaving nothing but an empty cell and a haunting sense of vulnerability in his wake. It wasn't just a prison break. It was a direct challenge to the Mexican government, to law enforcement, and to anyone who thought they could contain the likes of El Chapo. It was as if he were mocking them, reminding them that no walls, no matter how fortified, could keep him from reclaiming his freedom. The reactions from government officials were swift and harsh. They vowed to recapture Guzman, to bring him to justice once and for all. But behind closed doors, they must have realized the sheer scale of the failure. They had underestimated their adversary, and now they were facing the consequences. Guzman had embarrassed them on an international stage, and the pressure was mounting to not only find him but to explain how he had slipped through their fingers. The Mexican government faced severe backlash, not only from its own citizens but from international authorities who had worked tirelessly to see Guzman behind bars. The shame of losing such a high-profile prisoner was evident, and the stakes for recapturing him had never been higher. The escape became a point of contention not only for Mexican authorities but also for their counterparts across the border in the United States. The DEA, FBI, and other agencies had invested years into tracking Guzman and his cartel's operations. To see him simply vanish, especially in such a dramatic and well-executed manner, was a bitter pill to swallow. The world watched as Mexico scrambled to regain control, but in that moment it seemed as though the drug lord had outwitted them all. The escape wasn't just a logistical feat. It was a statement that even the most secure facilities were no match for Guzman's resourcefulness. Yet, for all its brilliance, this was not the end of El Chapo's story. It was, in many ways, just another chapter in his life, a life defined by an unyielding desire for power, freedom, and survival. The story of his escape left the world on edge, waiting, wondering what would come next. How long could he stay free this time? And what lengths would he go to in order to protect his empire? His escape was only the beginning of yet another pursuit, another cat-and-mouse game between Guzman and law enforcement. The stakes were higher, the pressure was mounting, and the world waited with bated breath. But before we move forward, ask yourself this: what kind of mind does it take to orchestrate such a feat, to dig his way out of an inescapable prison, and to make a mockery of the very idea of security? Was it brilliance, desperation, or something else entirely? Was Guzman a criminal, mastermind, or was he simply a man who refused to be confined by society's rules? Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the pursuit that followed and the ripple effects that El Chapo's escape had on the world. What comes next is a story of pursuit, of a government desperate to restore its reputation, and of a man determined to evade capture at all costs. The world would watch as Guzman's freedom became a symbol of the power struggle between the cartels and the state. And the question remained, could anyone truly catch El Chapo, or was he destined to remain untouchable? In the wake of Joaquin El Chapo, Guzman's audacious escape on July 11, 2015, Mexican authorities faced immense pressure to recapture the notorious drug lord. The tunnel escape, which had been meticulously planned and executed, was nothing short of a mockery of the Mexican prison system. Guzman, who was supposed to be locked up in one of the most secure facilities in the country, had slipped right through their fingers, and now the government had no choice but to launch one of the largest manhunts in history. The international community watched closely as the Mexican government, alongside U.S. agencies like the DEA and FBI, launched an extensive manhunt that spanned months. The escape not only embarrassed the Mexican administration, but also highlighted significant security lapses and systemic corruption within its prison system. The pressure was on, and this was not just a manhunt for a fugitive. It was an effort to restore the country's credibility. The search for Guzman was multifaceted, involving ground operations, intelligence gathering, and international cooperation. Authorities focused on the Sinaloa region, Guzman's stronghold, conducting raids and monitoring communications. Guzman's deep connections with the local population and his reputation as a modern-day Robin Hood made him an almost mythic figure in the region. People were reluctant to help the authorities, and many actively shielded him, providing safe houses, food, and information. Despite these challenges, the Mexican government spared no effort, employing specialized military units, high-tech surveillance, and even relying on the assistance of the United States. The Sinaloa cartel was one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world, and Guzman was at its helm. Taking him down was of paramount importance. The investigation began by dissecting the circumstances of his escape. Authorities were scrutinizing prison guards, administrative officials, and even contractors who had worked in the vicinity of the prison. The escape tunnel, over a mile long and meticulously constructed, had to have involved a significant number of people. Teams of investigators scoured through hours of footage, telephone records, and financial transactions to track down anyone who might have helped in the escape. Even as the days turned into weeks, Guzman managed to stay ahead, using his wealth and influence to outmaneuver law enforcement. His network was widespread and fiercely loyal, which made tracking his movements extremely difficult. In early October 2015, a significant breakthrough occurred. Mexican Marines, acting on intelligence, raided a ranch in the Sierra Madre Mountains near Tamazula, Durango. The rugged terrain made operations particularly difficult, and the raid was fraught with danger. As helicopters circled above, armed forces approached the compound on foot, their weapons at the ready. Guzman, who had always been a step ahead, narrowly escaped the raid, reportedly sustaining injuries during his flight. His survival instincts kicked in, and he managed to slip away through the dense mountains. The Marines found remnants of a hasty escape, discarded medical supplies, clothes, and even some personal belongings that indicated just how close they had come. This close encounter only intensified the urgency of the manhunt, with authorities tightening their net around his known associates and territories. Guzman's escape was not just physical, it was also psychological warfare. He knew how to exploit his legend, and he knew that every failed attempt to capture him only added to his mystique. A pivotal moment in the pursuit was the involvement of actress Kate Del Castillo and actor Sean Penn. Del Castillo had previously expressed sympathy for Guzman, leading to clandestine communications between them. The drug lord, enamored by the idea of telling his story to the world, agreed to meet with her, a decision that would ultimately lead to his downfall. In October 2015, she and Penn met Guzman at a secret location in the Mexican jungle, resulting in an interview published in Rolling Stone magazine. This meeting inadvertently provided authorities with valuable intelligence as they tracked the actor's movements and communications, bringing them closer to Guzman's location. His need for recognition, his desire to be heard, had betrayed him. As weeks turned into months, the noose tightened. Authorities conducted numerous operations, often coming close but never quite managing to catch their target. Guzman moved from safe house to safe house, always keeping one step ahead of law enforcement. He was reportedly using a network of tunnels under the cities of Sinaloa to evade capture, moving like a ghost beneath the feet of those who were hunting him. He even dyed his hair and grew a beard to avoid detection. Despite the pressure, Guzman maintained his operations, issuing orders to his cartel and keeping the business running. He was not just a fugitive, he was still very much the leader of a massive criminal enterprise. On January 8, 2016, after months of relentless pursuit, Mexican Marines launched a final raid in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. Acting on a tip, they surrounded a modest house in a neighborhood that seemed far removed from the glamorous hideouts one might expect for a man of Guzman's stature. At dawn, the Marines made their move. The ensuing gunfight was fierce. Bullets ricocheted off walls, and the sound of automatic fire echoed through the streets. Guzman and his men fought back, but they were overwhelmed. After the smoke cleared, Guzman attempted to escape through a series of underground tunnels, but his luck had finally run out. He emerged from a manhole, only to find himself face to face with the Marines. This time, there was no escape. He was arrested, handcuffed, and led away. Guzman's arrest was a significant victory for Mexican authorities, aiming to restore public confidence and demonstrate their commitment to combating organized crime. His capture was broadcast around the world, showing a weary but defiant drug lord, his face lined with the marks of a life on the run. Guzman's recapture had profound implications. It led to his extradition to the United States, where he faced multiple charges, including drug trafficking, money laundering, and involvement in organized crime. The U.S. government was determined not to let him escape again, and they moved quickly to ensure his presence on American soil, away from the influence and corruption that had facilitated his previous escapes. In 2019, after a high-profile trial in New York City, Guzman was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He was transferred to the United States Penitentiary, Administrative Maximum Facility in Colorado, better known as ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the United States, often referred to as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. There, Guzman would spend the rest of his life isolated from the outside world, unable to communicate with his cartel, his power stripped away. The trial revealed the inner workings of the Sinaloa cartel, with witnesses detailing the bribes, murders, and corruption that had fueled Guzman's empire. The once feared drug lord was now just another inmate, confined to a small cell for 23 hours a day. The pursuit of El Chapo underscored the challenges in combating powerful drug cartels. It highlighted the necessity for international cooperation, intelligence sharing, and addressing systemic issues within law enforcement agencies. Guzman's capture was a significant achievement, but it also served as a reminder of the ongoing battle against organized crime and the complexities involved in dismantling such entrenched networks. The Sinaloa cartel, though weakened, continued to operate, with new leaders stepping in to fill the void left by Guzman. The fight was far from over. The story of El Chapo's escape and subsequent capture remains a testament to the lengths authorities will go to uphold justice and the relentless nature of those who operate outside the law. It is a story of power, ambition, and the inevitable consequences of a life lived on the edge. Guzman's downfall serves as both a victory for law enforcement and a cautionary tale of the pervasive influence of the drug trade. His legend endures, but so does the resolve of those who brought him to justice. The manhunt for Joaquin El Chapo Guzman began the moment authorities realized he had slipped through their fingers. Panic and disbelief gripped the prison as they discovered the empty cell, the gaping tunnel beneath it, and the utter failure of a supposedly infallible security system. A sense of urgency reverberated not just across the prison, but across Mexico and the world. How had the most notorious drug lord in modern history managed to pull off such a spectacular escape, right under the noses of his captors. The chase for El Chapo had begun, and this was no ordinary manhunt. It was a battle of wits between the elusive kingpin and the collective might of law enforcement agencies worldwide. In the hours following El Chapo's escape, chaos reigned. The Mexican government, under immense pressure to demonstrate control, deployed thousands of troops, special forces, and intelligence units to track down the fugitive. The hunt extended beyond Sinaloa, reaching deep into Mexico's rural heartlands, urban centers, and even international borders. Guzman's vast network of connections proved to be a formidable adversary, with resources, hideouts, and loyal supporters spread across multiple regions. The authorities were racing against time, knowing that every second counted if they were to catch the fugitive before he vanished into the folds of the countryside. From the moment he emerged from the tunnel, a mile-long masterpiece of clandestine engineering, El Chapo was already many steps ahead of the authorities. His escape plan was not limited to digging an elaborate tunnel. It was a sophisticated, multi-layered strategy, involving safe houses, transport routes, and coordinated distractions. Guzman knew that evading capture was not just about outrunning the police. It was about outthinking them, predicting their moves before they could even consider his. The first 24 hours were critical. He moved swiftly, aided by trusted associates who ensured that he was always one step ahead. Guzman's escape was a direct challenge to the power of the Mexican government, and it came at a time when the country was already grappling with political instability and public outrage over corruption. President Enrique Peña Nieto, who had celebrated El Chapo's capture in 2014 as a significant victory, now faced widespread criticism and embarrassment. The media was relentless, dissecting every detail of the escape, questioning the competence of officials, and fueling a frenzy that only added to the pressure. Internationally, the escape was seen as a major security breach, with U.S. authorities also joining in the hunt, concerned about the implications for the drug trade and violence spilling across borders. As El Chapo disappeared into the mountains of Sinaloa, the legend of his cunning and resilience grew. People whispered stories of his near-mythical ability to slip through traps, to vanish just as law enforcement closed in on him. Helicopters buzzed over the Sierra Madre, while soldiers scoured remote villages, often met with silence and resistance from locals who saw Guzman not as a criminal, but as a modern-day Robin Hood, someone who had provided for them when the government had not. For many in Sinaloa, Guzman was more than just a drug lord. He was a benefactor, a symbol of defiance against a corrupt system. The search led to numerous near misses. There were times when the authorities came within mere moments of capturing him, but El Chapo always seemed to slip through their grasp. One such moment came in October 2015, when a raid on a suspected hideout in Durango turned into a chaotic firefight. Guzman, who was believed to be hiding there, managed to escape through a series of tunnels beneath the house. The raid left many wondering if they would ever be able to outmaneuver a man who had made escaping an art form. During this time, Guzman continued to live life on the edge, moving from one safe house to another, often spending nights in the homes of trusted allies, constantly evading the dragnet. He relied heavily on a network of loyal supporters, many of whom had benefited from his generosity over the years. In exchange for their silence and assistance, Guzman provided financial support, protection, and a sense of purpose to those who helped him stay hidden. It was a relationship built on loyalty and fear, a delicate balance that kept him just out of reach. The manhunt was not without its frustrations. As weeks turned into months, morale among the pursuing forces began to wane. The media shifted its tone from hopeful optimism that Guzman would be recaptured soon, to skepticism about whether he could ever be caught. Reports emerged of corruption within the ranks of law enforcement, of bribes paid to ensure Guzman stayed a step ahead. The lines between allies and enemies blurred, and it became increasingly clear that El Chapo was playing a game that the authorities simply could not win on their own terms. But the tide would eventually turn. In early 2016, Mexican Marines, working with U.S. intelligence, tracked Guzman to a house in Los Mochis, a coastal city in Sinaloa. A tip-off had led them to the modest hideout, and this time, they were prepared for anything. On January 8, 2016, a raid was launched in the early hours of the morning. The operation was swift and brutal. Gunfire echoed through the neighborhood as the Marines stormed the house. Guzman tried to flee through a series of tunnels once again, but his luck had finally run out. He emerged from a storm drain, only to be confronted by heavily armed soldiers waiting for him. In a last-ditch effort, Guzman attempted to escape by stealing a vehicle, but the authorities were ready. A high-speed chase through the streets of Los Mochis ended with El Chapo's capture. For the second time, Joaquin Guzman found himself in custody. His dream of freedom shattered, his audacious run finally brought to an end. But even in that moment of defeat, there was a sense that the legend of El Chapo was far from over. As the world watched the footage of his arrest, questions lingered. Would this be the end of the saga, or was there yet another twist waiting to unfold? Guzman had escaped before, and there were no guarantees that he wouldn't try again. But for now, the drug lord was back behind bars, and the Mexican government had its victory, however temporary it might prove to be. The world had been captivated, watching every move of the authorities as they hunted the most notorious drug lord who had once again escaped from their grasp. But it wasn't just the manhunt that captivated the world, it was also the question that burned on everyone's minds. Could the authorities really catch Joaquin El Chapo Guzman? And if they did, would it even matter? Would he simply find a way to escape again, slipping through the cracks as he had done before, taunting the very idea of law enforcement? The Mexican government, with immense pressure from the United States and under the scrutiny of the international media, launched what was arguably one of the most intensive manhunts ever seen. After El Chapo's audacious escape in July 2015, it took months of relentless effort to track down leads, find informants, and piece together a puzzle that spanned multiple territories. Guzman had a well-established support system, people who owed him their livelihoods, who would willingly risk everything to help him stay hidden. He wasn't just a fugitive, he was an enigma, a symbol of defiance, and a living legend for many. For months, El Chapo remained out of reach. His ability to stay hidden wasn't just about disappearing into the vast terrain of the Mexican countryside. It was about the loyalty of the people who were willing to protect him. They were people from towns he had helped, workers who relied on his operations, and allies in the cartel world who feared and respected his power. The influence El Chapo wielded made him seem like a ghost, an entity that was everywhere yet nowhere, seemingly impossible to catch. His cunning, charisma, and ability to blend into the shadows made him a force to be reckoned with, and the authorities knew they were dealing with someone who would stop at nothing to remain free. The trail grew cold on multiple occasions. There were sightings reported, tip-offs given, but each time the authorities arrived, it was as if they were chasing shadows. Guzman always seemed to be one step ahead, as if he could anticipate their every move. He moved from safe house to safe house, often using underground tunnels and hidden passages to stay out of sight. But then came the slip-up. It was late 2015 when word surfaced that Guzman had been trying to set up a meeting with producers and actors in Hollywood. He was allegedly interested in making a biopic about his life. This hubris would be his downfall. Communications surrounding these meetings gave the authorities a window into his location, allowing them to narrow down their search. For a man who had always been so careful, this moment of vanity would cost him dearly. On January 8, 2016, after 6 months on the run, Mexican Marines finally tracked Guzman to a house in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. The raid that ensued was nothing short of cinematic. Gunfire erupted as Marines stormed the house, engaging in a fierce firefight with Guzman's men. The noise of automatic weapons echoed through the narrow streets, and the air was thick with tension. Amidst the chaos, Guzman and his right-hand man attempted to flee through the city's labyrinthine sewer system. It was a desperate attempt to once again slip through the fingers of the authorities. They waded through the murky waters, crawling through the tight dark spaces, their breath echoing off the concrete walls. But this time, there would be no tunnel leading to freedom, no motorcycle on rails to whisk him away. The chase ended on a dusty road as Guzman was apprehended, his face covered in dirt, and his spirit visibly exhausted. The arrest was a spectacle. Cameras captured the moment Guzman was led away in handcuffs, surrounded by heavily armed Marines. The world watched as the once untouchable drug lord, who had evaded capture time and time again, was finally caught. This time, the Mexican government knew they could not afford another mistake. They moved quickly to extradite him to the United States, where he faced charges that spanned drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. By January 2017, El Chapo was extradited and placed in the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City, one of the most secure facilities in the United States, a prison designed specifically to prevent escapes. The trial of Joaquin Guzman in 2019 was a media frenzy. The courtroom was filled with journalists, lawyers, and spectators, all eager to witness the downfall of the infamous drug lord. Witnesses, many of whom were former associates, took the stand to detail the inner workings of the Sinaloa cartel. The testimonies painted a grim picture of the drug trade, a world of corruption, violence, and untold billions in profit. Guzman sat in the courtroom, at times appearing impassive, at times visibly frustrated. For a man who had once seemed untouchable, the courtroom was a stark reminder that even the most powerful figures could be brought down. The testimonies revealed the brutality of his operations, the vast network of corruption that had protected him, and the sheer scale of the drug empire he had built. In February 2019, Guzman was found guilty on all counts. The verdict was a culmination of years of investigation, countless man-hours, and the cooperation of multiple law enforcement agencies across borders. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 30 years. He was also ordered to forfeit $12.6 billion, a staggering amount that represented just a fraction of the wealth accumulated through decades of drug trafficking. Guzman was sent to ADX Florence, a supermax prison in Colorado known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. It is a facility where even the most infamous criminals are kept under conditions that make escape an impossibility. Here, Guzman would spend the rest of his life in near total isolation, a far cry from the mountains of Sinaloa and the empire he once commanded. As the prison gates closed behind him, it felt like the final chapter in the saga of El Chapo. The world watched as the man who had defied authorities, orchestrated daring escapes, and built a drug empire was finally brought to justice. But for many, the legacy of Joaquin Guzman lives on. His story is a reflection of the complexities of the drug trade, a tale of power, corruption, and the lengths people will go to for freedom. It raises questions about the effectiveness of the war on drugs, the allure of power, and whether figures like Guzman are a product of their environment or something more. The impact of his actions continues to be felt, not just in Mexico, but around the world, as governments and law enforcement agencies grapple with the ongoing battle against the drug trade. In the end, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was a man who refused to be caged. His escapes were legendary, his influence unmatched, but ultimately his fate was sealed. He now spends his days in a cell, far from the mountains of Sinaloa, far from the empire he built. Was it all worth it? Did the pursuit of power and freedom justify the cost? For El Chapo, the answer might lie in the stories that will be told about him for generations to come. Stories of a man who defied the odds, who escaped not once but twice, and who, for a time, made the world believe that he was truly untouchable. The legend of El Chapo may be over, but the echoes of his defiance will resonate for years to come, a reminder of the blurred lines between power, crime, and the relentless pursuit of freedom.